Today we're wrapping up our series, IQ, EQ. It's only a 2-week series, so you're either starting it or finishing it. And today we're finishing it. And we're talking about connecting more deeply in relationships with other people. It's based on a book by Daniel Goleman. This is a bestseller called Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. Every once in a while, I will just hold up a book and say, you know what, you ought to buy this book. And I think this book has been such a powerful influence in my life and in many other people's lives that if this is something that you would like to know more about, I would just recommend buying it. You can probably get used copies now. It's been in print for several years. Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And the point of the book is that emotional intelligence is all about relating with other people, managing our own emotions, networking, relationships. And because of that, it could definitely be more important in our lives than IQ. I mean, what's more important than relationships? And people who have a high EQ, a high degree of emotional intelligence, realize that every business is the people business. We're always relating, whether it's work or it's home, parenting, whatever it is, friendships, church family, we're always relating. So a high EQ could be more important than a high IQ. So you have maybe a mother who has this longing in her heart, this dream in her heart, to connect as deeply as possible with her partner and with her children. But the busyness and the stress of life just always seem to creep in there. And she has this idea, oh, this is going to be so great, we're going to have some family time together, and then it's just not what she wanted it to be. I mean, she still had a good time, but it's just not quite what she wanted it to be. Because some things are blocking the emotional experience within the family. Are you with me? I know this is something that we deal with in life. There's say guys at work, and it's just not fulfilling. He likes the job, but the people around him, the coworkers, the boss, it's just not that great. And there's something, he just doesn't feel the fulfillment that he wants to fulfill. There's a lot of conflict at work, and it seems like, man, there has to be some answer here. There has to be something I could do to enjoy my career more and get more fulfillment out of it. But there's just something there, and perhaps it could be related to EQ. We can all stand to raise our level of emotional intelligence. Nobody has arrived yet. And maybe, we're surrounded by people who maybe they have a low EQ, but raising our EQ will at least help us in the way that we deal with it. So that's where we're headed in the rest of this sermon. You see the 5 abilities in emotional intelligence. We looked at these last week. We covered the first 3 last week. Awareness of your emotions, what's going on in your heart, being able to manage them, being able to motivate yourself, even taking negative emotion and turning it into positive emotion and motivating yourself. And then today we're talking about empathy and connecting with other people more deeply in relationships. And so I'm going to read a scripture. It's one of the most famous parables that Jesus told. A parable is a story that illustrates a spiritual point. And this may be kind of a different look at a parable that is very familiar to many people. It's the famous parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. An expert in religious and civil law. This is a theocracy that Jesus lived in. The politics and the religion were linked together. So this is an expert in religious and civil law, stands up to test Jesus. He kind of wants to trap Jesus by asking Jesus a question with the hopes that Jesus can't really answer it. He wants to embarrass Jesus. And this religious and civil expert in the law gets an answer from Jesus that he definitely did not expect. And so we're going to read the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10, 25 through 37. We're talking about empathy and connecting more deeply in relationships the way that we long to do. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? It's just a common question in the religious atmosphere of this time. Jesus said, what is written in the law? How do you read it? So Jesus asked him the question, just turns the question back to him. And the expert answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. That could be it. It's like, oh, right answer. You get the sticker. We're done. Great. But then something else is going on here. The religious expert wants to justify himself somehow. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? So why would he ask that? Why would he want clarification about who his neighbor is? Maybe there are some people in his world that he doesn't really want to love. And if he can say, oh, that's not my neighbor, then that means he doesn't have to love them. Maybe that's what he's going for. Verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, which is the elevation drops 3,400 feet in 17 miles. So it really is going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, around sharp turns and rocky cliffs, when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road. Certainly he'll help the poor beaten man, right? But one man, he passed by on the other side. So to a Levite, which is a very religious person, when he came to the place and saw him, the man robbed and beaten and bloodied, he passed by on the other side. Wow, okay. But a Samaritan, we'll talk about who that is, a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. The word could also be compassion. He had compassion on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, the medicines of the day. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, money, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. And then Jesus looks at the religious expert, and he says, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied. Now notice, he won't even say the word Samaritan, but he says, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Booyah! What an amazing... Now, the reason that this parable is even more powerful than we realize at first glance, this is, what happens here is absolutely brilliant, is that the religious expert who asked the question and the priest and the Levite, they don't associate with Samaritans. If you've heard this sermon before, priest, you know this. That there was a cultural and religious difference and ethnic difference. It was a sharp divide in their culture. And they did not associate with Samaritans. To them, Samaritans were the other, different people. They were prejudiced towards Samaritans. And Jesus makes the Samaritan the hero of the story. And he reveals to the expert who's asking the question, who is my neighbor? Well, the answer is the Samaritan is your neighbor. The person you like least, that's your neighbor. And the religious expert and the priest and the Levite would not have empathy for the robbed and beaten man or the Samaritan. We're talking about empathy and connection. They wouldn't have empathy for any of the people in the story. And they definitely wouldn't show compassion toward them and connect with them. And so we're just going to break this down and look at what we can learn here about empathizing with others and connecting more deeply in relationships with other people. It may not be prejudice that's in the way for you. It could be other things. We're going to talk about some things that block empathy. That's where we're headed today. So if you have your sermon handout or your worship handout, there's a place where you could take notes and write some things down. So we're starting with number 4, the 4th ability in emotional intelligence, to empathize with other people. If you ask Jesus, what does it mean to love your neighbor, Jesus? I think Jesus would say something like, well, it means to empathize with them, to show empathy toward other people. That's what it means to love your neighbor. Empathy is the ability to recognize and identify somebody else's emotion. It's the ability to look at another person and say, oh, that's what they're feeling right now, which is a huge skill. And then the ability to say, oh, I've felt that way before. Maybe I feel that way now even. And I can somehow identify with that person and join with that person in their emotion. Empathy literally means to feel into somebody else's emotional experience. It means that you can enter into the emotion of that person. You can see it, identify with it, and enter into it, join with that person in their emotional experience. So let me just ask you, how would you score yourself in your ability to show empathy? Some of us would be like, I don't even want to talk about it. You know, for some of us, it's a struggle. Some of us, it's more easy for you, or it's easier for you. Some of you have had this experience where throughout your life, people will come to you and tell you about their problems. Have some of you experienced that? People just kind of naturally come to you and talk to you. Apparently, you have this thing where you just project empathy to people. And they can see that, oh, this is somebody who's safe and I can talk to them. But a lot of us struggle with this. So how would you score yourself in your ability to show empathy, to recognize and identify the emotions of other people? So first, we all need to express empathy in order to relate to other people. It's an absolute necessity for connecting with anybody on any kind of a deep level, to the point that if it doesn't happen, it can just be so awkward that it's funny. I saw an interview with Will Ferrell about Anchorman 2. He made the second Anchorman movie this past year. And I don't know if you know this, but if you've seen the Anchorman movies, they're absolutely brilliant comedy. Most of them are improv. Like, there's very little script writing. Did you know that? Very little script writing in the movies. And it's mostly improv comedy. So what they do is, in the script, they set up this scene that's just kind of dumb. And then that gives them the potential to improv and come up with all the comedy in the movie. So most of the laugh lines are just made up on the spot. So Will Ferrell talked about how he plays his character, Ron Burgundy, who's the main character in the movie, which is totally inept news reporter, right? Just totally awkward, no IQ, no EQ. That's Ron Burgundy. So in the interview, Will Ferrell said, all we have is the scene, just the basic setup, and then we improv. So listen to what he said. When I play Ron Burgundy, what guides me in coming up with comedy is I ask myself, how could Ron be totally emotionally inappropriate in this moment? Like, how could Ron emotionally ruin this moment? That's what Will Ferrell asks himself as he's playing. Isn't that fascinating? Just to kind of see the behind the scenes. That's what he asks himself as he's playing Ron Burgundy. In other words, Ron Burgundy does not show empathy. He cannot connect with other people, and it can be obviously very, very sad and lead to all kinds of brokenness, but it can be so awkward that it can even be funny. That's how Will Ferrell guides his character of Ron Burgundy. And we all need friends who give us empathy. We all need to receive empathy and have other people recognize emotion in us. If we don't have empathetic friends, they're not friends, first of all, if they're not showing empathy. You really don't need people like that in your life. Here's what can happen when you don't have empathetic friends around you. I have a picture. That's called the circle beard. His head is completely shaved, uniting with his beard. See, if somebody has friends, they don't let this happen. If somebody's like, I'm thinking about having the circle beard, friends are like, no, bro, don't do it. Friends don't let friends have the circle beard, all right? This is what happens when we don't have empathetic people in our lives. We need feedback from other people who love us and care about us so we can grow as people. It may not be the circle beard, but there could be other, shall we say, ugly, not endearing character flaws that we may have, ways that we could grow as a person. And we need the feedback of empathetic friends to help us grow in life as well. Well, regardless, the Samaritan man felt empathy for the robbed and beaten man. He looked at the robbed and beaten man, and apparently he said, thought to himself, that could be me. I could be robbed and beaten on this road. And he had compassion. He knew the man was hurting. He recognized his pain, and he identified enough with his pain to help him. He showed empathy. Now, this is maybe a different look at the parable of the Good Samaritan. I wonder why the priest and the Levite passed by on the other side. And I wonder why the religious expert didn't have empathy for Samaritans either. Now, we know there are some religious things going on here. It's a long story, but in the religion of the expert and the priest and the Levite, helping a bloody man would make them ritualistically unclean. It's just part of the religion. So they didn't want to be unclean. It was inconvenient for them. So they passed by on the other side. We know there were some cultural things going on. They didn't really associate with Samaritans. There was cultural prejudice going on. You just wonder, though, were there other things going on? I don't know. There had been a lot of conflict between Jews and Samaritans. Perhaps there was pain from the conflict. Perhaps there were bad memories. Perhaps there was a desire for revenge. Whatever it was, empathy is natural for humans to express. And if you find it hard to express empathy and recognize emotion and identify it in other people, it's not because you just don't have the skill of empathy, because it's natural. It's because something is blocking your empathy. If you find it a challenge to empathize with other people, it's because something is blocking your empathy. Something was blocking empathy between the priest and Levite and the robbed and beaten. Are you following me? It's kind of abstract. Something was blocking their empathy. Yet religion, culture, prejudice, maybe there's some other stuff too, but in your life, if you find it a struggle sometimes to recognize and identify with emotion of other people, what might it be that is blocking your empathy? Last week, we talked about how when we go through painful experiences in life, our brains have this way of compartmentalizing that experience to where it will separate the emotion and then our thoughts about that experience. That's why you could talk to somebody who went through an extremely painful situation, horrible thing, and they can talk about that awful, horrible situation with no emotion on their face. Remember last week we talked about kind of being cut off between your head and your heart to where we can intellectualize our experiences, where we don't really feel the emotion anymore. And a lot of times the greatest work of a counselor can get somebody to reconnect between their head and their heart, to where they can actually feel that emotion. It's a coping mechanism that our brains just kind of kick into gear when we go through something very, very painful. That is a major empathy blocker. Because what that does is, if it cuts off our heads and our hearts, we can't really recognize and identify the emotion in ourselves. And if we can't recognize and identify our own emotion, guess what? We're not able to recognize and identify with emotion in other people. So, once you become aware of your emotion, remember, awareness is the first step in emotional intelligence. Once you become aware of your emotion, empathy for other people happens automatically. Whatever is blocking your empathy, if you're just finding it hard to connect, you have date night all set up, and you're really excited about it, but then it happens, and connection it's just not there. There's just not the heart to heart. The time with family is just not what it was. The time hanging out with your friends just isn't what it was. The relationships with the coworkers, it's not what you wanted it to be. Something's blocking empathy in that connection. Well, once we that, by becoming aware of our emotion, empathy happens automatically. Daniel Goleman says it like this: empathy builds on self-awareness. The more open we are to our emotions, the more skilled we will be in reading the feelings of other people. Remember, there are 5 abilities in the emotional intelligence list, but they're not of equal importance, and they're not equally challenging. Some are harder than others, some are easier than others. So I want you to conceive of it like this. Remember the list: awareness, managing, motivating, empathy, connection. If you can get to the place where you are aware, if this is number 1 on the list, if you can get to the place where you are aware of what's going on in your heart in a particular moment, if you can self-monitor and get to the place where you can say, here's how I feel right now, I'm going to go ahead and say that you're probably way ahead of the average person. Do you agree with me? If you are simply aware of what is going on in your emotional life, and you can monitor that from moment to moment, no matter where you are, in a heated discussion, or a date night, or with coworkers in the office, politics are just getting to you. If you can monitor in that moment, or if you're giving a sermon and you're not sure if the point's getting across, if you can monitor, or if you tell a joke that's not funny, that's happened to me, if you guys can believe that. That wasn't funny either. That's fine. Moving on. We're used to it by now. Why start now? Why start to be funny now? It's the last Sunday here. If you can monitor how you feel from moment to moment, that's an advantage over most people. That's a skill. That self-awareness is something that most human beings do not have. If you just have the selfish motivation that you want to make more money in life, and you want a promotion, and you want to do better in business, and you're looking for a competitive edge, I would say just being aware of how you're feeling in any given moment would raise your EQ enough to where you have an advantage now. I think people who are aware of their feelings are probably going to make more money in life if they wanted to do that. Just for totally selfish reasons. That puts you ahead of the pack right there. I would maybe picture it like this. If you're rolling a ball up a hill, or a boulder, whatever the illustration is, you're rolling it up a hill. It's like awareness is at the top of the hill. The hardest part is just becoming aware of how you feel in that moment, of recognizing and identifying your own emotions. And once you get that ball to the top and you have awareness of how you feel, you can self-monitor. 2 through 5 on the list are almost as easy as rolling the ball down the hill. That's how I view it, at least. That once you can become aware of what's going on in your own heart, and you can be in touch with that, you can feel your emotions, you can speak from the heart, you can automatically show empathy to other people. You can automatically see, oh, that's how that person feels right now at date night, or the child, or a coworker, or a church family in a conflict or whatever. That's how that person feels right now. And I know that because I know how I'm feeling right now. I can recognize and identify my own emotion, so I can recognize and identify the emotions of other people. And last week I told you the story of going to required counseling when I was in seminary. And the counselor asked me, how do you feel right now, Ryan? And I couldn't give her an answer. I didn't know. I had intellectualized my painful experiences in life. I had a block between my head and my heart. My empathy was certainly blocked. I could not relate to other people the way that I wanted to. I couldn't tell her, so she handed me a sheet with 20 or 30 feeling words, emotion words on it. She said, look at the sheet and pick a word and tell me how you feel. And I felt like it was like learning to read all over again. I'm stressed, I'm angry, and I just did my best. And so she gave me this homework. She said, as you go throughout your day now, several times a day, whenever you can, I want you to ask yourself this question. How do I feel right now and why? How do I feel right now and why? And that homework changed my life. As often as I could think of it throughout the day, brushing my teeth in the morning, at a stoplight, surfing the web, whatever, lunchtime. How do I feel right now and why? And if this is a struggle for you, if something's really blocking that and you're not really aware of what's going on in your heart, it can be tough at first. You have to acknowledge this is how I feel. And so I would be at a stoplight. How do I feel right now? Angry. All right, why? Why am I angry? Well, just stressed this morning. In a hurry this morning. I'm angry. Why? Because I feel all this pressure at work. I have to get all this stuff done. Why? Well, we need a paycheck, sure. But the stress, all the hurriedness, is there any other reason? When's the last time you felt like that? Stressed and hurried, and I gotta get all this work done. Well, felt that way for a long time. Years. Why? This is all at a stoplight. You know what I mean? Well, I don't know. I felt like that in high school. Why? See what we're doing? We're just retracing our steps. And maybe it gets back to this time where it's like, I don't know, I had this general sense, even when I was a kid, like I wasn't good enough. I had to prove my worth. I had to work really hard and perform in order for people to be happy with me. I don't know. And I'm angry. You could have massive insight. I mean, you can have life-changing insight while you're like eating a sandwich. If you're willing to ask yourself, how do I feel right now? And why? It's the first step. And once that awareness comes, when you're able to do that, and you practice it and it becomes a habit, and you're sitting in a tense meeting, and you can feel your blood pressure rising, you're like, how do I feel right now and why? All of a sudden, you're aware now. And my gosh, that is power. You're able to do something now that most human beings are not able to do. You're at date night and it's not quite working out the way you hoped it would. You've been looking forward to it and it's not that fun. How do I feel right now and why? As you're talking over the table, you can start to become aware. And at that moment, the rest of these things just become skills that you can pick up in a book. Because the hard part's done. You're aware now. That's the hardest part. And you're able to, in a minute, we'll talk about just some simple skills for connecting with other people, but you're able to learn those and connect more deeply because you've done the hard work of becoming more aware. So one more thing on awareness before we move on, or empathy, before we move on to connecting. Next week, when we start at Perry High School, we're going to go into a brand new sermon series that is meant to help with awareness because it's the most important thing. And it's a series called My Type. And we're going to look at your unique personality type. There's a personality inventory called the Myers-Briggs. How many of you have taken the Myers-Briggs in your life? A lot of you. If you don't remember your 4-letter code, you're going to want to have that before next Sunday. In your worship handout, there are directions for you to go to onechurch.com, and you can, for free, you can go online and you can find that 4-letter code for your personality. Now, everybody has a unique personality, right? That's true. Nobody's the same. But the Myers-Briggs is a way of categorizing into common personality types. There's 16. 4 main categories. And each of the 4 weeks in the series, we're going to go through one of those 4 main categories. So you need your code to figure out which one you are. And it's not going to describe you perfectly. Again, everybody's unique. But it's a way of saying, oh, this is a struggle for me. Because, well, my personality is kind of weak in that area. I have strengths in this area, but I'm weak in this area. So I can be more aware of that. It's all about awareness. So the next 4 weeks, we're breaking down awareness even more in the My Type series. So please go get your 4-letter code this week. It's free. It's online. And here's a quick 1-minute promo for the new series starting next week, My Type. So the 4 main types, rationals, nice. Thanks, Jeremy, here's the applause. He created the video. So rationals, idealists, guardians. Didn't you love the picture of Lumberg, by the way? Hey, Peter, what's happening? Rationals, idealist, guardian, artisan. We're all one of those 4 in the Myers-Briggs framework. We're all unique. Everybody hear that? We're all unique. But this is just a guide to help us become more aware. All right. The point is, when we're aware, empathy becomes automatic. All right, so now we're going to wrap up just for a few minutes. Connecting emotionally in relationships. Again, awareness is the hardest part. These are just some simple skills. Once you're aware, you're connected, you can recognize and identify emotions in other people because you can see your own. Now here are just some skills for connecting. Connecting with another person means syncing your moods. Everybody still with me? It's been a lot of information, kind of a long sermon. Okay, we're going to wrap it up in a few minutes. Syncing your moods. To some people, this might sound a little too medical or scientific. Some people are a little more romantically minded, and this doesn't sound very romantic, the idea, even if it's a love interest or even connecting with people at work, like syncing our moods. That's what this is. Like, that's what it means to connect with other people. Well, according to this framework in emotional intelligence, connecting with another person means that you sync your moods together. Now, it might sound kind of medical and scientific until you picture what it might look like. Imagine you're at a restaurant. You look over at the table next to you, and you see a couple. It's a young man and a young woman. And you realize they're on their first date. And so you just kind of, just tune in to the conversation. You look over every once in a while. You don't want to be weird about things. You definitely don't want them to see you, but you start to look over. And you see that the young man is leaning forward. I mean, he's like as close as he can get. He's leaning forward. He's making all kinds of intense eye contact. You can see the excitement in his eyes. He's been waiting for this date for a long time. And you also observe that he is doing most of the talking. He's just going on and on about work and how he likes his bug collection and all these details about himself, on and on and on. And then you notice the young woman, and she looks very different than he does in this first date conversation. She is sitting back as far as she possibly can without being over. And she's not really looking at him nearly as much as he's looking at her. She's kind of fidgeting with her bracelet, maybe checking a text every once in a while. looking at her watch. Will there be a second date? How do you know that? How do you know that? The nonverbals, the body language, right? The body language has revealed to you that their moods are not synced. Now, you know the body language part. Most people would realize that, right? He doesn't, unfortunately, but most people would recognize that. The body language reveals what's going on at a deeper level. Their moods are not synced. That's what we're talking about, right? You follow me so far? Their moods are not synced. So let's say you're at another restaurant on a different night, and just so happens at the table next to you, there's a couple, and you realize they're on their first date. And the guy is leaning forward. And it's just like he's as close as he can get. And you look at the young woman, and she's leaning forward too. And there's all kinds of eye contact happening between these two people. And they're talking equally. They're equally engaged. They're excited. There's a coy smile every once in a while. And you kind of look as closely as you can, and you realize what's going on. And then you would also observe something else. When he leans to the side a little bit, she, without even realizing it, leans to the side a little bit. You know what I'm talking about? And when she nods her head like this, without even realizing it, he nods his head like this. And you realize, will there be a second date? Oh yeah, right? And you realize that the nonverbals reveal to you that their moods are synced. And here's what's happening. Again, we've already done the hard part of awareness. So this is just a skill. For some people, this isn't a major aha. For some people, it is. But here's what's happening. Their behavior is mirroring the other person's behavior. Right? That's how we know that their moods are synced, because their behavior is mirroring the behavior of the other person. Maybe it's been said of you, or maybe you've heard it said of somebody else. When I talk to that person, I feel like I'm the only person in the room. That person is just so charismatic or charming, or that person has a great personality, whatever it is. Probably what's happening is this person either naturally knows how to do this, or they've developed the skill of mirroring the behavior of the person they're talking to. And there are people who can fake it. I mean, they're narcissistic people who they don't feel the emotion, but they go through the outward motions of connecting with people. There's motion without emotion. So you can fake that. We don't want to fake that, manipulate people. We really want to empathize with people, right? And feel their feelings. But then we also know beyond that there's a skill of connecting with somebody. How do I communicate to this person that I care about them, that I recognize their emotion and identify with their emotion? Well, I mirror behavior. So it's easy if you're on a first date and there's all kinds of chemistry and it's like lightning bolts. It's easy to mirror behavior. We do it without even realizing it. What if you're in a job interview? This is when the power of EQ really is shown. If you're in a job interview, first of all, let's just go through the list, 1 through 5 things. Awareness. How do you feel before a job interview? You're nervous, right? Okay, so it's good to be aware of that. I'm nervous. Why are you nervous? Now, that could lead down a rabbit trail. But for now, why are you nervous? Because it's normal to be nervous before a job interview, correct? You want the job, pay raise, whatever, you want the job, so you're nervous. I hope I get the job, and I realize I may not, so I'm nervous. Well, now we're at step 2, managing your nervousness. And the way that you manage that emotion is what you believe. And Brandon talked about some skills last week of getting out of, if you're flooded in emotion, focus on something logical and think through logically. Why am I nervous right now? Well, first of all, it would be good to tell yourself, I'm nervous because I'm going in for a job interview, and that makes me normal. Feels good to be normal, doesn't it? So that can help you manage your nervousness a little bit. I'm normal. The way I feel right now is normal. And if there needs to be some cleanup in the past, well, maybe I had a job interview that didn't go well one time, and I'm afraid this is going to go badly too. Well, you can start to sort through that logically. Why did it go badly? Did I do something? Was it just not a match? Maybe I'm glad I didn't get the job. And just kind of work through your emotion. But you're aware you've already done the hardest part. And then motivation, 3. I use that emotion to motivate myself positively. So I know the interview's coming up, and I feel nervous about it. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing nothing and then just getting to the interview and just being nervous the whole time, I'm going to allow that nervousness to motivate me. It's anticipatory anxiety. And I'm going to allow that nervousness to motivate me to prepare better for the interview. I'm going to take that emotion and I'm going to direct it in a positive way. So I'm going to prepare better. I'm going to go through common interview questions. I'm going to write stuff down. I'm going to look in the mirror. Whatever it means, I'm going to be motivated with that emotion. Then I get to the interview. Because I'm aware of how I feel and why. And I'm sitting across from the interviewer and I can monitor my feelings. I can also identify or recognize and identify with the feelings of the person interviewing me. Now this is where we're talking about major advantage. If we're just talking about an advantage, competitive edge, how many people do you think sit in a job interview and they empathize with the person interviewing them? How common do you think that is? Like never. It's never happened, right? I mean, it's so uncommon. If you were interviewing somebody with a job or for a job, and you're sitting across the table and you're interviewing this person, and you can see somehow that this person seems to be at peace, this person is somehow tuned in emotionally to you, and it's like almost I can feel like this person realizes interviewing is stressful too, and I have job pressures. And like I can feel that this person can connect with me on an emotional level. How does that make the interviewer feel? I would say usually pretty good. I would say 9 times out of 10, that person's going to get hired. Because the interviewer can feel this is an emotionally together, empathetic person. And then here's 5, the connection. When the person is interviewing you, you kind of mirror. The person leans forward a little bit, you lean forward a little bit. And not because we want to manipulate, but because we want to connect with people. We want to raise our EQ and be able to connect with people on a deeper level. And I kind of mirror a little bit. They lean, I lean. They nod, I nod. Does this sound just terrible and secretive or something? It's the way human beings communicate. And we just want to be aware of that and use those communication skills to communicate that we care for people. We don't want to manipulate, but we want to communicate our empathy to people. I would go ahead and say, man, instead of just being the person who's really nervous and stammering and hoping you give all the right answers, you monitor, you're self-aware, you're dealing with your nervousness by managing and thinking about things in the past and getting healing from the past, and you're motivated to prepare for that interview, and you can look at the person interviewing you with empathy, and then you can kind of mirror and connect. Man, that really, really increases the chances of that person being hired. It's an amazing advantage. One more example. A person you really care about, and you want a deeper connection with this person. And maybe you wanted to get together with this person, it's been a while, and you want to connect deeply, and it's just not quite there. Well, you're aware of how you feel in the moment, right? We can all identify with this. We have these longings, to connect more deeply with the people we love. Well, you're aware of how you feel right now in that moment. I'm kind of disappointed. And I've been looking forward to getting together, and it's just not quite as, I don't know. The connection's not as strong as I wish it was right now. I'm kind of disappointed. Okay, I'm aware. And so instead of acting out of that disappointment and the night just goes worse because I don't know that I feel disappointed, I don't know why. Well, now I'm aware of that. And now I can manage that. We've had a stressful week or a stressful month, and we just both need to cut each other some slack. My wife's sitting right here. She's so much better at this than I am. She should be preaching this sermon right now. We need to cut each other some slack right here across the table as we sit. And so I'm just going to kind of relax. I'm going to manage my emotion, number 2. And think about all the good times we've had and all the stuff we've accomplished and where we've come from and why I love this person so much in the first place. And then number 3, I'm just going to take that emotion, that disappointment, and use it to motivate me to connect right now. And number 4, I'm going to look at this person with empathy. Well, I'm aware of my own emotion now. How does this person feel? Well, he or she, they're stressed out too. Life's been tough this week. And so I'm going to have empathy. You might even say that out loud. It's been kind of a tough week, huh? The person's like, yeah. They talk a little bit. You see how this date night or this time or whatever it is just getting better and better and better as we go through the EQ list. And now number 5, I'm gonna actually practice the skills to communicate that I'm empathizing and connecting with this person. I'm just gonna start to mirror behavior. I'm just gonna kind of lean in if they lean in, and we're just gonna sync moods, and we're gonna get on the same page. What if date night could go like that? Instead of just the natural result of just being stressed out and busy, and now here we go, and had a hard time parking, and now it's just not what we thought it would be. Or any connection in your life. What if we could go through this list and raise our EQ, and that could be the norm, the new norm in our relationships? I'll end with this. Connecting with others and with God is our greatest need in life. We all know deep down that we need this kind of connection with other people. Let me just tell you something I'm aware of. People don't stay around in a church because of the sermons. I just want you to know I know that, right? I mean, maybe some has some influence. The most powerful thing in a church family is connecting with other people. How many of you are aware of that? The community that you can build with other people and the friendships, the 4 a.m. friends. If you're in a crisis and you have to call somebody at 4 a.m., you can call them and they'll actually pick up the phone and talk to you. It's the most important thing in life. Connecting with somebody is healing. How many of you know the power of a hug? If you're struggling and it's been rough and you have somebody you love, and if you kind of live alone, if you're single and there's not somebody around, you need friends all the more. Just the power of a hug, just human touch. It's almost like a real good hug and a connection with somebody can just like pull the stress out of you. Connecting is so healing. The point of Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan is that God is like the Samaritan. And God's view toward you is one of empathy. That God looks at you and he can recognize your pain, your emotion, where you are, and God can identify with that and recognize that, and God can join with you to where you are not alone in your experience. And God has provided a group of people that you can connect with and walk through and grow together with. And that community of people is called the church. And I know that's not what people think of when they hear the word church, but that's what it's meant to be. And that power of connection is so healing that God has given us to each other for that reason. One action step, if you would really like to raise your EQ, might be joining a one group. They start here in a couple of weeks and you can sign up at the connection table. I think it's the best environment we have in the church to be able to connect with other people and raise our EQ together and support each other and experience the healing power of connection. And then, this is the last Sunday here at Hancock Elementary before we go to Perry next week. There have been a lot of breakthroughs in this room over the last year. A lot of aha moments. Think back, if you've been here for the whole time, or no matter how long you've been here, when you first showed up in this room, how have you grown? Closer to other people? How have you grown as a person? How have you become more open to God over the past months or weeks or year or whatever it's been in this room? If you have not said, you know what, God, I want to open my life to a God who empathizes with me and who identifies with me in my pain. I want to open my life to you. I want to give you that opportunity as we close in prayer as well. If you haven't said, I do. I want to open. I have questions and doubts and all those things are there, but I do want to open my life to the God that views me with empathy and wants to connect with me. I'm going to lead in a prayer in a minute, and I want to invite you to do that as well. We have people in all kinds of stages of spiritual lives. And maybe for the first time you would say, I want to open my life to the God who views me that way. I want to lead.